When, in the summer of 1908, a dramatic political shift swept through the Ottoman Empire, army officers, intellectuals, and reformists, known collectively as the Young Turks, forced the restoration of constitutional rule, ending decades of absolute authority under Sultan Abdulhamid II. To supporters, the moment represented rebirth. To critics, it was a dangerous gamble. The Young Turks believed that modernization, law, and constitutional governance could save the empire from collapse. Instead, their rise to power exposed deep internal fractures that modernization alone could not heal. The roots of the Young Turk movement lay in frustration. By the late 19th century, the empire was struggling with territorial losses, economic dependence, and political paralysis. Sultan Abdulhamid II had suspended the constitution in 1878 and ruled through a centralized and tightly controlled system. While his reign brought some stability, it also suppressed political participation and silenced reformist voices. Many educated Ottomans, particularly within the military and bureaucracy, believed that authoritarian rule was suffocating the empire's future. Operating largely in secrecy and exile, the Young Turks formed networks dedicated to restoring constitutional government. They argued that only a return to law, representation, and equality could rebuild loyalty among the empire's diverse populations. Their vision was not revolutionary in the European sense, but reformist, aiming to preserve the empire rather than dismantle it. Yet within the movement itself, there were competing ideas about how that goal should be achieved. The turning point came in July 1908, when army officers in the Balkans rebelled against the central government and demanded the reinstatement of the constitution. Facing widespread military support for the uprising, the Sultan yielded. The constitution was restored, parliament reopened, and political prisoners were freed. Across the empire, crowds celebrated what many believed was the dawn of a new era. Newspapers flourished, political debates filled public spaces, and hope briefly replaced fear. The Young Turks presented themselves as guardians of unity and progress. They promised modernization of the army, reform of education, and equality for all citizens, regardless of religion or ethnicity. The idea of a shared Ottoman identity was revived, intended to counter rising nationalism by offering participation rather than repression. For a moment, it seemed possible that constitutionalism could bind the empire together. That optimism proved short-lived. Almost immediately, divisions within the Young Turk leadership became apparent. Some favored liberal governance and decentralization, believing local autonomy would reduce ethnic tensions. Others pushed for strong central control, arguing that only a powerful state could prevent further fragmentation. These disagreements were not merely theoretical, they shaped policy and deepened mistrust both within the movement and across society. In 1909, a counter-revolt erupted in Istanbul, fueled by conservative forces opposed to rapid change. Although the uprising was suppressed and Abdulhamid II was deposed, the episode revealed how fragile the new order truly was. Power increasingly shifted toward the Committee of Union and Progress, the dominant faction among the Young Turks, which began ruling with growing confidence and decreasing tolerance for opposition. As the Young Turks consolidated authority, their approach changed. Fearful of losing control, they relied more heavily on the military and less on consensus. Press freedoms narrowed, political rivals were sidelined, and decision-making became centralized. The promise of inclusive constitutionalism slowly gave way to a more rigid vision of unity, one that left little room for diversity. Ethnic and religious tensions intensified rather than eased. Non-Muslim communities initially welcomed constitutional rule, hoping it would protect their rights. However, as centralization increased, many began to feel marginalized once again. Nationalist movements among Arabs, Armenians, and Balkan populations continued to grow, often viewing Young Turk policies as another form of domination rather than genuine reform. Foreign crises further tested the new leadership. The annexation of Bosnia by a neighboring power in 1908 exposed the empire's diplomatic weakness. Soon after, wars in the Balkans stripped the Ottomans of most of their remaining European territories. These defeats shattered public confidence and radicalized Young Turk leadership, convincing many that survival required stricter control and rapid militarization. Modernization advanced, but unevenly. Railways expanded, military training improved, and education reforms continued. Yet economic hardship persisted, and rural populations often saw little benefit from political change. For many ordinary citizens, constitutional promises remained distant ideals overshadowed by war, taxation, and instability. The Young Turks increasingly framed loyalty as a test of patriotism. Dissent was equated with betrayal, and diversity was seen as a threat rather than a strength. This shift marked a departure from their original reformist vision and intensified internal divisions. The empire was now constitutional in form but authoritarian in practice. By the time global war erupted in 1914, the Ottoman Empire was deeply polarized. The Young Turks, now firmly in control, believed alignment with powerful allies and military strength would restore lost prestige. Instead, war accelerated the empire's collapse, exposing the limits of forced unity and centralized reform. The Young Turk Revolution of 1908 was born from genuine desire to save a declining state. Its leaders believed that law, modernization, and nationalism could rebuild an empire weakened by centuries of strain, yet their failure lay not in ambition, but in execution. By prioritizing control over compromise and unity over inclusion, they deepened the very divisions they sought to overcome. History remembers the Young Turks as both reformers and rulers who inherited an impossible task. Their rise marked the empire's last serious attempt at self-renewal. Instead of halting decline, it revealed a painful truth. Constitutional change alone could not repair an empire already fractured by identity, conflict, and mistrust.